It's November 2015. I've been reading this month's Smithsonian Magazine. I've subscribed to and received this magazine before, but this will be the first one I review. Well, not really review, but I'm going to go through the major articles and talk a bit about them. Not really going to critique the magazine itself. So let's look at the first article. Well, first there's a little bit about Mickey Mouse and pop art. There's a bit about the inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I will review at some point. I actually like the twists that the movies Van Helsing and I, Frankenstein put on it. There's a short article titled Rhino Plasticity, and talks about a scientist named Matthew Marcus who has a project to grow rhino horns from yeast that produces keratin. Rhinoceros horns are made up almost entirely of keratin, which is the same stuff that hair and nails are made of. And they also have some deposits of calcium and melanin, which makes them stronger than pure keratin. Rhinos are killed for their horns, which are often prized as trophies, or people will carve them into trinkets, decorative items. They're also said to have magical properties in tribal medicine. Being made of the same thing as hair, nails, hoofs, taking rhino horn into your body will do absolutely nothing. Now, to deter the motivation to use them as trophies, what some people will do is inject colored dye into the horns so they appear fake on the animal, while still being useful to the animal, and this appears to be having success. The next short article, titled Early Bloomers, is about a fossil contender for Earth's oldest flower and plant. Trying to figure out how to pronounce it. Monsettia, if I pronounce that right, not sure. Before classified as a conifer. It's interesting, but there's not much detail. I like fossils, but there's not much in it. Then we get into the first long article, Behold the Blobfish, which is weird that this thing is real. It looks like wet silly putty with a face. It looks like the Pokemon Grimer and a blob of silly putty hooked up and spat out sludge with a frown. And apparently there have been plush toys of this thing and characters on a kid show. I'm not going to go into that. And a song. So this blobfish was discovered at the bottom of the Tasman Sea, the region of ocean between Australia and New Zealand. It uses water as support instead of a swim bladder and probably feeds by sucking in anything that comes too close. Well, it says the species is not endangered. I think it's pretty safe from being fished, as this fish is probably way too gooey for anyone to want to eat it. Now we come to the article called The Phantom Menace, and I've been wanting to draft a script for a review of that movie too, but this article isn't about Star Wars. The intro reads, Was a mole behind the still unexplained betrayals the CIA suffered during one of its most catastrophic years, and is he or she still out there? This has to deal with Russian intelligence officers for the KGB who, during the Cold War, were secretly working with the British Secret Service, and vice versa. Now, apparently, in the year 1985, a few of the double agents that were found, the timelines of when they began didn't line up with secrets being traded between the countries or something, and so there's the possibility of someone who was never discovered. It's a good mystery. It's a complicated story. I had to read it a couple times before I knew what was going on at all. After that is an article titled The Devil's Tongue, The True Motives of the Star Witnesses at the Center of the Salem Witch Trials. And the pages are about Tituba, the first suspect named by the girls who began the whole scare. Now, it doesn't really go that deeply into examining Tituba's motives, but does make the conclusion that the more Tituba gave the Inquisitors what they were looking for, That being details of a pact with the devil, the more reliable a witness she was considered to be, and she was able to survive the trials, whereas those who attempted to defend their innocence tended to be the ones who were executed. Next, the rescue mission is about tracking down the black market of Native American artifacts, primarily in the Four Corners region of the American Southwest. The article compares this thievery to how would you like it if a Native American dug up your grandmother, took her jewelry and clothes, and sold them to the highest bidder. Well, I probably wouldn't be burying my ancestors' artifacts with them unless they requested that. I'd be more motivated to keep them as heirlooms for my family's future generations. Now, the plundering of relics and artifacts is, of course, nothing new. It's been going on for thousands of years. The collection seized from hoarders in the Four Corners region is called the Cerberus Collection, and some of its pieces date back 8,000 years, while many others are somewhat more recent. I don't know if this collection will ever be viewable by the general public. Probably eventually. I would be one who shares the point of view that relics like these should be restored to the Native Americans' descendants. Then again, the Native American culture is in such rubble right now. It's really very sad. Then we get into more Western history with the story of how George Custer stole a horse named Don Juan 16 days after Lee's surrender at the end of the Civil War and 2 days after President Lincoln's assassination. On May 23rd, 1865, this event that took place on that day, a massive ceremonial march through Washington, D.C., General Custer on the horse he stole and the crowd cheering for him. For anyone who isn't familiar with Custer, he was a cavalry commander in the American Civil War and Indian Wars. Over much of his career, very successful, but was curb-stomped at the Battle of Little Bighorn, where he led his troops straight into a hopeless situation. And he was killed too. He's been labeled by history as a butcher. I don't know a whole lot about him to say myself. I do tend to sympathize with the Native Americans when I study history. So, maybe. I have to read more about him specifically. If he really was the butcher that he's said to be, and initially I think that's true. It's the whole march down Washington, D.C., it's funny how we kind of honor the wrong people and often toss aside the true heroes throughout history still. Then the article Skyfall is actually about the story in the new Bridge of Spies movie. It seems that the pilot, Gary Powers, kept a journal about his imprisonment, and was later this journal was later donated to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum by his family. Now, during his imprisonment, there was a cellmate with him who was likely planted as someone to watch him, but Powers would later on say this person actually helped keep him sane and was the one who suggested he write the journal. When you've been captured and imprisoned, you're going to try to make friends and survive any way you can. This one is a short article, but it's an interesting story. Next we have Slavery's Trail of Tears, detailing a resettlement, meaning a forced march, of hundreds of slave men, women, and children from the Upper South to the Deep South. A march to the slave auctions in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama during the American slave days, repeated over and over, eventually moving over 1 million slaves. This article is massive. It's many pages long, and it goes into some of the personal history of slaves and their descendants. And there's arguments that the migration of these slaves people have tried to bury and erase it from history. Well, lots of stories of the American slave trade and of any history all over the world, many parts of history, have been distorted or lost. But slavery itself is like the most taught subject in history classes in America. The subjugation of the African Americans is given far more attention in schools than the wars against the Native Americans or the actual formation of the